Welcome to Life in the Playoff Chase. The Minnesota Wild find themselves now trailing St. Louis in the Western Conference playoff standings after games this weekend. We'll set the tone for the week. We'll talk about Joel Eriksson Ek, maybe return to the lineup on the Cali trip. All that and more coming up on today's episode of Locked on Wild. We are your team every day.
You're Locked on Wild, your daily podcast on the Minnesota Wild. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is happening, everybody? Welcome into another episode of Locked on Wild, your daily Minnesota Wild podcast. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you, as always, for making Locked on Wild your first listen each and every day. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast platforms so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. Today's episode of Locked on Wild is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 if your bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/locked on to get started. On today's episode of Locked on Wild, we recap a weekend that saw a game get away from the Minnesota Wild. Even though they did battle back to get it to OT, felt like a game they could have handled with a better start. We'll talk about some of the fallout as well as we await the return of Joel Eriksson Ek. We'll get you the latest on his status, as well as taking a look at portions of the lineup that need a little bit of a jolt here. My name is Seth Topol, your daily Minnesota Wild insider, credentialed Wild media member, joined as we typically are on a Monday edition of Locked on Wild by Alex Micheletti. And Alex, it's a 1 point Micheletti Monday as the Wilds get one of two against the St. Louis Blues. And you can look at that game Saturday through both sides of the lens, I think. Yes, they did complete the comeback to get the game to overtime, but they also left a point on the board. And it feels like had they gotten off to a better start and not allowed St. Louis to take the lead in the dance, felt like they could have had two, and they could even have potentially stopped St. Louis from getting the 1 point that they did.
Yeah, the Wild were, the better of the two teams, I thought. St. Louis was begging for the Wild to take over that game, and yeah, that's tough. Because the Blues won yesterday too, so they go above the Wild by 1 point. They beat Anaheim, who Anaheim just doesn't seem to care anymore. They have clearly mailed in the rest of the season. So, when you give St. Louis a point, and then they get another 2 points, and then they move up, and it's just like, what? How is St. Louis above the Wild again? But you can't with how many games are left, you can't just afford to just give away points. You have to continue to get to as much as possible.
And we're gonna continue to do this throughout the rest of the season. The Wilds wake up today finding themselves now 5 points behind the Vegas Golden Knights because Vegas beat the New Jersey Devils yesterday.
Right.
And as you alluded to, the St. Louis Blues beat Anaheim. So the St. Louis Blues actually 1 point ahead of the Minnesota Wild and 4 points behind the Vegas Golden Knights. Vegas also has a game in hand. If they win that game, then you're talking about the Blues being 6 points back and the Minnesota Wild being 7 points back at this point. But this is going to be how it goes every single day of the season. And so the only two things that will continue to happen here is continuing to check in on where everybody's at from a points perspective and continuing to underline the fact that the Wild just need to continue to win games. Like if they are truly trying to be a playoff team, which the decisions these last few games, particularly in the minutes department, they 100% are. That's been the goal from the get-go. And so you're not going to take your foot off the gas at this point in the season until you are mathematically eliminated. You have to keep winning games because you're now 3 wins behind the St. Louis Blues and 3 wins behind the Vegas Golden Knights. And so you have to get more points than those 2 teams because you're going to lose that tiebreaker to both of them.
Right. Yeah. It's tough when you are, you're not only chasing, but you have none of the tiebreakers either. So it's just like, yeah, it's a double whammy. And that's why it continues. That's why we hammer it so much. It's so hard to climb so many teams when you put yourself in a hole like this.
And Saturday's game further underscored how much Joel Eriksson Ek has missed because the Wild got carved in the Faceoff Circle, which faceoffs by themselves are not super indicative of winning or losing. But if you lose a ton of faceoffs,
possession of the puck, yeah,
exactly. And so that was a huge portion in which Joel Eriksson Ek was missed. But let's not forget the fact that on the power play in which the Blues scored, your 2 forwards that were out on the ice in that instance, Marcus Johansson, Jake Lucchini. Why?
Not ideal.
Why? Like I asked this in the postcast to the audience. Like, do we not have anybody that is more capable of filling a spot? And it's not only who was out there, but it's what happened on that power play goal. Jordan Kyrou could have held his hockey stick out at full arm's length and done a 360 and not hit anybody. Like you allow the one guy that can beat you to just go completely unchecked. And you've got Marcus Johansson sitting in the middle of the ice, just existing as he has done so admirably throughout the entire season so far.
It's like they panicked on who to use in penalty kill roles. Yeah. And you can't be doing that this time of the year. They knew that they were going to trade Duhaime and Dewar, and so you need to to anticipate that and prepare guys to be in those roles. And clearly, Johansson has no idea what he's doing on the penalty kill. Lucchini, I have just that is just absolutely baffling. How did he get elevated in that type of critical role at this time of the year? Have that.
It's funny too, like you throw him in on the penalty kill, which you'd argue is more important than 5-on-5. You won't play him at 5-on-5 though. Like Lucchini had 8 minutes and 21 seconds in a game that went to a shootout. 8 minutes, 21 seconds of time on ice. And yet you're throwing him out there on the penalty kill in a critical spot. And that was not a great penalty by Ryan Hartman. No. I'll take the first one that he got called for and throw that completely out. Because
that was bizarre. We didn't even get to see, garbage. We still didn't get to see what he did on that.
But that second penalty was horrendous. Yeah, like you're reaching completely around the Blues player. I forget who it was, but reaching completely around. They'll call that every time, and that's the one in which the Blues got the power play goal.
Right, and I mean, like you said, I mean, Jake Neighbors was doing video game passes that they're just where he was left completely on an island, and Kyrou just was able to to tap it in. It's that was frustrating.
And so with Hartman in the box, I understand that your options are limited, and you've got Foligno and Gaudreau as your top penalty kill forwards. I'm not going to object to that because that's. But on that second unit, let me just run through the names of players that I would rather have had out there than Johansson and Lucchini. Kirill Kaprizov, Matt Boldy, Matt Zuccarello, Marco Rossi, John Merrill. Literally, it's like, and Merrill that was in jest,
Right.
but like I would rather have somebody who doesn't play a ton of penalty kill time yet plays to try to kill off that penalty, as opposed to being like, well, we can't put Rossi out there for fear of making a mistake. We can't put Kaprizov out there for fear of making a mistake. We can't put Boldy out there for fear of making a mistake. That second half of that sentence, I'm emphasizing it for a reason, is there is a large portion of what this team does in these critical games that is simply being risk averse, which is never a strategy that leads to a win.
Well, and another problem that we need to talk about too is the management of the minutes too. I mean, I know a lot of the times it's it's on the coach too, but on the player too. I mean, Matt Boldy in overtime, I mean, he had almost a 3-minute shift. That I was shocked that St. Louis did not finish that one in overtime. I don't know if they weren't noticing Boldy out there, but the urgency, it's like, what? Come on, St. Louis. Like, what are you doing? And the guy just is refusing to get off the ice too. Cause there was, I mean, at time, I'll give it to him at times in the shift, he wasn't able to get off, but at other times, he didn't even look to get off when he had multiple times to do that. And it just seemed like guys were gassed too. And I didn't understand the strategy late with especially in the third period. Two guys just didn't seem to have their legs, and they were very lucky to get that to overtime as well.
And that Rossi quote, like you heard his quote after the game, right?
Mm-hmm.
He said the team basically didn't show up for the first two periods. Judd's hockey show, Judd Zolgad, hammered that home pretty emphatically. How are you saying that 60 plus games into the season?
Right.
In a game that you absolutely have to have.
Right. And again, it seems that Kirill Kaprizov is the only forward that wants to play. It's they can't always rely on him.
No.
It was nice that Marco, had chipped in. He has been so quiet. I don't know what's going on with him there. He might be running into another wall here, unfortunately. But they need more than 97 if they want to stay in this thing.
I want to go through the numbers because I have taken a look all the way back to the start of 2024, because this is not a new problem. This is not a new problem of the bottom six, like by and large being on milk cartons. It's not a new problem. And so we'll further underscore just how bad it's been and why this continues to push towards the you may make the postseason, but guess what? The other thing too is Vancouver only has a 1-point lead in the overall Western Conference picture on the likes of Dallas, Colorado, and Winnipeg. So the chances that you get the winnable team of the Western Conference playoff teams, that's getting smaller and smaller, because turns out Vancouver's in a little bit of a rut.
Right.
And so it's entirely likely, if you did make it, that you're getting Colorado, Dallas, or Winnipeg, who haven't beaten yet this year.
And do we need a repeat of Dallas, of Pete DeBoer, just needling another wild coach, because he would try to get under John Hines' skin too. If it was that easy with Dean Evison, he can do it to John Hines as well. And Dallas arguably would be the worst of all of the matchups. They just have been blown out by Dallas, and Dallas got better at the trade deadline. And, it's just like, they do not want the Texas squad for sure.
No, we don't need the Texas beatdown. Let's dive into these numbers a little bit here, as well as trying to figure out. Let's just try to get things aligned down the middle. We'll take a look at how the center position has played out here since Joel Eriksson Ek went out of the lineup. All that as we continue today's episode of Locked On Wilds after this. Today's episode of Locked On Wild is brought to you by Robinhood. Did you know that even if you have a 401k for retirement, you can still have an IRA? Robinhood has the only IRA that gives you a 3% boost on every dollar you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this, now through April 30th, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar you transfer in from other retirement accounts with a 3% match. That's right, no cap on the 3% match. Robinhood Gold gets you the most for your retirement thanks to their IRA with a 3% match. This offer is good through April 30th. Get started at Robinhood.com/boost. Subscription fees apply. And now for some legal info. Claim as of Q1 2024, validated by Radius Global Marketing Research. Investing involves risk, including loss. Limitations apply to IRAs and 401ks. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold for 1 year from the date of first 3% match. Must keep Robinhood IRA for 5 years. The 3% matching on transfers is subject to specific terms and conditions. Robinhood IRA available to U.S. customers in good standing. Robinhood Financial LLC member SIPC is a registered broker-dealer. And we welcome you back into today's episode of Locked On Wild. Once again, we're your first listen each and every day and your team every day. Make sure to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. We hit the 2,500 subscriber mark on YouTube, which means that there are going to be some exciting things coming up here soon as the YouTube subscriber count continues to rise. It opens up some possibilities that lead to exciting things for our coverage of the Minnesota Wild. So stay tuned there as the week unfolds. That's on my to-do list for this week to get that stuff going. But Alex, I'm going to read you some numbers here. So since 2024, Kirill Kaprizov in 27 games, he's got 42 points, 22 goals, 20 assists. He's just on a heater that is lasting multiple months. He looks himself. He's been playing really well. Joel Eriksson Ek, before he got hurt, 14 goals, 21 assists in 31 games. 35 points. By my math, that's over a point per game. Matt Boldy, 13 goals, 19 assists in the last 33 games. He's at 32 points, so slightly under a point per game. Even Zuccarello, 5 goals, 22 assists in the last 30 games for 27 points. He's at 0.9 points per game. Of the next 3 players, 2 of them are defensemen in terms of most points on the team over the last 30-plus games. Brock Faber's got 22 points in his last 33 games. Then Ryan Hartman has 21 in the last 33 games. Jonas Brodin has 14 points in the last 25 games. You want to know the names of the players that are under 10 points in the last 33 games. We have Zach Bogosian at 9, Jake Middleton at 8, which is fine. They're defensemen. Marcus Johansson has 7 points in the last 25 games. And in the last 29 games, I beg your pardon. He has 34 shots in that span. Connor Dewar is 12th on the team. He got traded and is still 12th on the team in that span in points with 6. Marcus Foligno also has 6. Freddie Gaudreau has 4 points in his last 30 games, 1 goal, 3 assists. Pat Maroon is 18th on the team. He got injured and then traded. Vinny Lettieri has 3 points in his last 19 games played. Jake Lucchini has 2 points in his last 25 games played. Mason Shaw has 1 point in 8 games. Murat Huznadinov, no points through his first 2 games. Alex, I got to ask, because the direction of the team is clearly to win now. It's clearly to win and to get into the postseason. But how can you say with a straight face that some of these roster decisions are putting you in the best spot to win? Because if you want to dive a little further beyond the points, Jake Lucchini has played double-digit minutes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times since the middle of January. He's only gone over 10 minutes one time in March. That was 12:34 against the Anaheim Ducks. 1-2-0. By and large, controlled play the whole game. Played 8:21 against St. Louis. Vinny Lettieri has played over 10 minutes one time. That was against the Sharks back on March 3rd. He played 5 minutes, 18 seconds. Mason Shaw played 5 minutes, 41 seconds. He's played over 10 minutes once since he came back into the lineup. And not only that, but you look at the disparities in the game against the Blues. Freddie Gaudreau played 11 minutes, 3 shots. High water mark for him for the last 30 games. Marcus Johansson, 19 minutes, 51 seconds, no shots.
What's he doing playing in overtime too? We just knew at the end there he wasn't going to shoot the puck. Why is he out there in overtime?
That's just my big thing is you reward Murat Huznadinov for a real solid debut. Really encouraging, solid debut. He played good defense. He won faceoffs. You reward him with 9 minutes of ice time. Stapled to Marcus Foligno and Freddie Gaudreau. And let's look at the center position here. So Ryan Hartman played 20 minutes. Critical penalty that led to a power play goal for the Blues. 5 faceoff wins, 16 faceoff losses. He did have a shot on net, but he was called. And again, I'll give him the benefit of the doubt on the first penalty. I thought that was mostly garbage. But if you are going to, and maybe I should tease this after the break, if you're going to reunite Kirill and Marc-Andre like we saw late in that game, trying to get a spark, as Michael Russo said, 36 and 97 are not going to be separated for a while now. I can't get behind adding Ryan Hartman to that mix. I just can't.
No. It screws everything up, without Ek. Lines are going to be all over the place.
And let's dive into this top 6 jumble now after the break, because if we're gonna go back to that route, then you are putting Matt Boldy on an island. I don't like that either.
No, it's gonna cave his play big time.
So we'll talk about that to finish the show. We'll take a look at what we have coming up here for the rest of the week. All that as we continue today's episode of Locked On Wild after this. Today's episode of Locked On Wild is brought to you by FanDuel. Say goodbye to busted brackets, because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the tournament. Whether you're betting on a big upset or a number 1 seed to take care of business, it's time to go dancing on America's number 1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 to use on point spreads, money lines, or you can even pick who you think is going to win it all. My suggestion, now that the brackets are officially out, hit those play-in games. Hit those play-in games as an opportunity to get you that $200 in bonus bets that you can then use for the entirety of the tournament. You can pick that 16 seed that's going to get the upset this year. Look out, Purdue. That would be my best suggestion for tournament time, is hit those play-in games before the madness starts on Thursday. So you've got the full array of bonus bets to use for the rest of the first weekend. Visit FanDuel.com/locked-on and bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets. That's FanDuel.com/locked-on. FanDuel.com/locked-on. Final segment of today's episode of Locked On Wilds. Once again, we thank you for making Locked On Wilds your first listen each and every day. Seth Topal joined by Alex Micheletti to finish things off here today. So, Alex, assuming that we see the reunion of Kirill Kaprizov and Marc-Zuccarello here, really just trying for any sort of a spark at this point. You're putting Matt Boldy on an island then, because we have seen enough this season to know that Marcus Johansson is going to be that second line wing come hell or high water. He is going to occupy that spot. It'll be 2058, and the Minnesota Wild will be fighting for an 8 seed in the Western Conference playoff picture. And the tweet will be, here's the line combinations, and it'll say Marcus Johansson, second line wing. It just death taxes Marcus Johansson on the second line. And I'm not a fan of that at all, because we've seen it play out time and time again. And so if it's me, if we're going to concede that Kaprizov and Zuccarello get the top line honors again, you got to go, I think, Rossi or Kuznetsov as your center for that top line. As far as the second line goes, I would love to see people that are going to actually give you a little something, a little bit of an upside. There just are too many guys in this lineup that just don't. And it just further undersells how much pressure is on the top 5 to get it done every night, because the bottom 7 are not cutting it.
No. And Johansson, who, no matter who he plays with, it seems like it makes the rest of the line just lose their games, and you can't have that happen with Matt Boldy. And that's you might be able to get away with it with Anaheim, but you're not going to get away with it the next night against the Kings. And a must, right. If you lose that Kings game, that's the devastating of the two, because that's the team you're really chasing. Anaheim doesn't care, clearly, losing to the Wild and Winnipeg, and then St. Louis, they're in Chicago, they're in a complete tailspin.
Yeah, and that's the thing too, is the wins have come against those teams,
right?
This during this stretch,
the awful teams.
you're not. And there have been good wins sprinkled in. Like, there have been impressive wins. I think by and large, since that Arizona game on the West Coast, I think up until the Blues game, the battle level was exactly where it needed to be. And so
kudos to them. Yeah.
The people on Twitter that are going to hop in and say, oh, you're just ripping the team left and right again. Like, there's your compliment. Like, right. The battle level up until the Blues game was exactly where it needed to be. But for the 50th time this season, you get that 2 or 3 game winning streak where we do this exact same thing. And then you get into that type of a game and you either lose or you get one of the 2 points. And it's either a slow start, it's a penalty that gets taken advantage of by the other team. Like this is how the whole season has gone, and the lineup has been the same way the whole season.
Yeah, yep, exactly. It's like, where is this for the complete, full game? Just your opponents are going to be doing that. At least the ones that care, and they need a full team effort. Like I continue to bring up, it's just 97. The team just looks to him to do everything, and
Yeah.
that's so much pressure on Kirill, and it's so nice to see him full go healthy, because we at points thought he would never be back to 100%, and he's kind of carried this team, and he needs he needs everybody else to climb on board.
So the Wild have this week at the Anaheim Ducks, familiar opponent. We finally get an opportunity to see the experience that has been Pierre-Luc Dubois with the Los Angeles Kings. And then you play the St. Louis Blues on Saturday. So two familiar opponents, and then the Los Angeles Kings, who are duking it out with the Vegas Golden Knights for that third spot in the Pacific. And I talked about this with Isha on the Soda Pod, and we've talked about it here too. Of the two teams that are likelier to fall out of that third spot in the Pacific, like, let's not, I know Vegas has been in a little bit of a tailspin here recently. Let's not forget about the Los Angeles Kings, who had one of the all-time bad stretches here this season that led to their head coach being fired. They've rebounded since, but they got a lot of guys on that team that are not having good years by their standards. And Pierre-Luc Dubois, like, I'm gonna pick on him because he has in 67 games, he's got 15 goals and 16 assists for a guy that signed a mega deal to come to Los Angeles.
What, $8 million a year? That's so unacceptable. If they didn't have the way Quinn Byfield is playing, it's if they didn't have him, they'd be in a world of hurt.
They'd be in trouble.
Yeah, and Cam Talbot's been all over the place. It's been a weird season for him, and their goaltending has been very, very shaky, and I don't really trust David Riddick
No.
as the backup. And they lost Phoenix Copley, and it's just I can't believe Rob Blake didn't try to trade for a goalie at the deadline.
Yeah, Talbot had a miserable January. He went 0-6-2. Since then, he is 6-3-1. So he started to get himself back on track, but he's had some games in which not great. He had the game in which I'm assuming he came in relief against Buffalo. That was the 7-0 loss to the Sabres. Right. He gave up 2 goals in one period of work there, but he gave up 3 against the Blues, 3 against Dallas, 3 against the Ottawa Senators, and then shut out Chicago on 28 out of 28 saves. So Talbot's got some good in him. He's also got some not good in him. That sounds familiar because
we saw that
here too.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing. It's the same story as against the St. Louis Blues. Like, this is a caliber opponent in which you got to be ready to go from the jump. Home or road, you got to be ready to go from the jump.
On a back-to-back, too, that they have to show that energy. Look at, St. Louis had their back-to-back against the Wild and then Anaheim, and they were able to pull it off in both of those games. So the Wild have to return serve and do that as well coming up here. And yeah, just you can't. You're probably not going to have Fleury play both. So
no.
Gus is, and the way Gus, it's like, oh boy, you want to talk about Cam Talbot having a roller coaster season. Gus might not even be on that roller coaster. It's it's just it's just like, oh, hope and pray when he's in that.
Well, and I would assume the logic says, well, you start Gus against the Anaheim Ducks,
Right, to try to get him some confidence at least.
Do we remember what happened the last time he started against Anaheim?
Yeah, it was.
That was, I'll give you a hint. That was Gustafsson actually started both of those games against Nashville and Anaheim before the All-Star break, and he gave up 3 goals in both, and the Wild lost both in regulation.
Right. That was
I'll never forget it because it was the weirdest thing. Ryan Hartman blocked the initial Troy Terry shot with his ankle, and I don't know what Gustafsson was looking at, but then the rebound goes directly out to Troy Terry, and he just immediately shoots it, and he scores from 10, 15 feet away.
Too, yeah.
So yeah, I don't know what. We'll find out.
It's and the Kings game is a national TV game too. Actually, both of those.
Oh, good. So that'll be a 9:52 start.
Yeah. It's it's gonna be late back to backs with both of those. Just you can't show Anaheim any mercy, and then I try to manage the minutes better because the Kings play a hard game. And you want them to have as much energy as possible on a back-to-back because you can't lose against the Kings.
And Judd said it too, and he's dead right. You're going to expend all the energy that these guys have to get to the playoffs, and they're not going to have anything left.
Right.
Kaprizov's not going to have anything left in the tank. Faber's not going to have anything left in the tank.
They both look gassed against St. Louis. Just, there was a fight to the finish.
25 minutes a night will do that, right, especially for a forward. So we'll see what happens. My tone, I'm sure, will be much more positive if the Wild win all 3 games. You have 100%. To win all 3.
Yes.
And so we'll see. We'll have you covered every step of the way regardless. So make sure to hit that like button if you have not already. And we'll guide you through the rest of the season here with 14 games to play. We got you covered with pre- and post-game content, episodes throughout the week, live streams, you name it, we got it. So make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. We got new episodes every Monday through Friday as part of the Locked On Podcast Network.